Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. This is episode 2. I'm joined by one of my very good friends and fellow Instagram page host,
Yes.
Claudius Wick. So, how are you, man?
Amazing, man. Yeah, I'm stoked to be part of it.
If you haven't already, make sure to follow at Framed Film. As always, we're gonna just ask our guest for 3 films that define them, just so that you guys can feel
Yeah.
like you're getting to know them a little better. So,
Number one, probably, if I'd have to, like, if somebody would have to get to know me through films, just then number one would probably be Haneke's The White Ribbon, Das Weiße Band in German. Yeah, one of my favorite directors overall, and one of my favorite films. And then Bergman's Persona, of course, and No Country for Old Men by the Coens, which was my number one for quite some time, but then it got, yeah, The White Ribbon took its spot like a few months ago when I rewatched it, and yeah. After getting into Haneke, a lot of directors kind of slipped down in my list simply because he's so good. Yeah.
he's a master for sure.
Yeah.
That's funny because No Country for Old Men was my number one for. I think it holds the spot for the longest amount of time.
Yeah,
It
same.
was from probably like 2012 all the
Yeah.
way till like 2017, I want to say. It was my
Yeah.
favorite movie.
Yeah.
So the topic of today's episode is best movie endings of all time. We're going to do our best to not spoil the plot of any of these, but fair warning, all of our picks have been out for,
Quite a
let's
while.
see,
Yeah.
probably over 10 years,
Yeah.
except for Portrait of a Lady on Fire, but
Yeah.
I'm sure most of you who care have already seen it. But regardless, we'll do our best not to spoil plot wise, but rather we'll be discussing what makes the endings so great thematically, and just in the context of like endings in general. So we've both picked 5 films each, and then to conclude, we have 2 shared picks.
Yeah.
So, um, let's see. Anything else I forgot to mention? I don't think so.
Yeah,
Uh,
probably just that all the picks are equally as incredible, and there's not a specific order that we'd rank them in, at least not for me.
Me neither. Yeah.
Because yeah, all the films that I picked are ones that I love a lot, and it's not just the endings I love, but the overall films. Yeah.
All right. So before we get into the meat and potatoes, we have to thank the sponsor of today's episode, which
There's a
is.
sponsor.
I was surprised myself. Yeah. Our sponsor today is Anchor by Spotify. Anchor is the easiest way to make a podcast. Anchor is free to use. It's very user intuitive. And there are creation tools on the platform that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more platforms. And you can make money from your podcast. They'll match you with sponsors themselves. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Okay, now on to the good stuff. Getting into the topic of endings, just in general, first of all. Claudius and I are both writers, and I'm just
Well,
curious to hear your take.
you're probably more of a writer than I am at this point, but I'm hoping to become more of a writer in the future.
Such a humble
Yeah.
guy, such a humble guy.
Mm.
But yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm curious to get your take on the sort of place of the ending
Mm.
in the overall scheme of what makes a film.
Yeah.
But for me, the ending is probably the most important aspect for me.
Yeah.
Like there could be a mediocre film, but as long as it lands on its feet or it stuns me in the ending, like it could completely change my
Yeah.
perception of a film.
Yeah.
I mean, of course you want balance. Like, I'm not saying it's good to have like a mediocre middle and then just go for a good ending. But
Yeah,
yeah.
of course, it has to flow with the rest of the film,
Hmm.
and it can't be too over the top, with, like in contrast to the rest of the film. There's certain films that just where the ending is so spectacular that the rest of the film, the beginning and the everything that comes before, can't hold up to it, and then the ending seems kind of out of place. But if an ending, for me, I'd say it has to manage to conclude all the themes in a way that feels satisfying, not in the way that it has to tie up all the loose plot ends or complete every character arc or something like that. I'm actually quite against that. Personally, I don't need that from a film, but I like openness as well in terms of interpretation. So an end, it doesn't have to conclude in terms of giving answers.
I've been thinking a lot about like movie twists recently and how a lot of
Mm.
films that I used to like are so reliant on
Oh yeah,
this twist element. And
I get yeah. There's definitely been a couple of films that I used to love that have those kinds of endings that now I don't necessarily like as much as other films I do today.
mhm.
But yeah, go ahead. What did you want to say?
No, I think it was going back to the point that you said about sort of this ambiguity and this sense of like not being resolved completely by the end. And I think that sort of ties into our, I guess, inherent love for short films as well, because when you're structuring a short film, there almost sort of can't be a full resolution. And it's those sort of films that resonate with me the most and stick with me the most after watching. It's the ones that after the credits roll, like you're still thinking about the last thing that you just saw.
Definitely, yeah.
Um,
Or the ones that don't only extend, but they feel like they just start after the credits roll. So it's only then that you truly start thinking about it in a way that you haven't while actually watching the film, but it completely continues within your mind. Yeah.
mhm.
And I guess we love that within features as well, not just in short films.
Right, right. Yeah, I was just meaning like it sort of might stem from that because
Yeah.
we have not made a feature yet, but
Yeah.
in structuring shorts, it's been sort of like that in my experience. Um, which brings me to an interesting point before we get into our picks, because you mentioned that you'd just watched The Tree of Life today,
Mm.
which many people will know is my favorite film. I'm just curious what you thought about the ending of that film.
Yeah, first of all, Tree of Life was one of the weirdest, it's probably one of the weirdest experiences I've had with film. Not watching it today, but as, yeah, I've seen the first 20 minutes of it years ago when I was, I don't know, maybe 11 or 12, when I wasn't even remotely into film that much yet, or 13, I don't know, but pretty young. My family, my parents ordered that film and we watched the first 20 minutes of it, and for those who don't know, it gets different after the first 20 minutes.
Different
So
is a word, yeah.
yeah. Don't want to spoil anything, of course, but I guess a lot of people will know it. And for back then when I watched it, it was a kind of psychedelic experience. I had, after, like, just watching those first 20 minutes, I had dreams about that film for weeks and like couldn't sleep that night. It was so weird because um simply because it's filmed in such a unique way and it's such a unique film, and now watching it today, of course I look upon it in a completely different way than I did back then. But the ending combines that grandiosity that came before with a kind of quietude that, yeah, and I think this combination of something extremely huge and something so intimate is something that's common with kind of philosophical films and approaches towards life as
Mhm.
well. So I loved the way it ended. Yeah, I really appreciated
Yeah.
that.
Malick sort of brilliantly explores every single, like, the meaning of life, the meaning of death, religion, science, time, space. Like, he explores all of this through one tiny little family in 1960s Texas or 50s. And like, just that juxtaposition between grand and intimate is, I think, one of the main like takeaways of the film. The first time I saw it was on a portable DVD player, so a screen about like yay big. But yeah, my high school film teacher, who hated the movie, had it on DVD and was like, "This sucks. Does anybody want to borrow this?" And so I was like, "I do." And yeah, that was the first time I saw it. Luckily, since then I've seen it in theaters 3 times. But yeah, it's a very special movie. Okay, so enough with Malik. There will be a whole episode with Malik, I assume.
As there should be.
As there should be. Maybe we can do a Hanukkah episode too. Yeah, let's get into our picks. My first pick,
or we could do one each.
Yeah. I was thinking we'd alternate.
Yeah.
So yeah, my first pick is Kurosawa's Throne of Blood, which I know you haven't seen yet, but it's basically Macbeth. So there's not much I could spoil in that regard anyway. But I saw this film relatively late into my Kurosawa journey, I guess you could say. Like, I'd already seen Seven Samurai probably like 10 times before I saw this one. I think this was like a 1957 release, and also starring Toshiro Mifune. I watched this after I had seen Ran and Kagemusha as well. So sort of revisiting Kurosawa's black and white aesthetic after seeing his grand like scope of color was almost like really refreshing in a way. I mean, he's a master of both. I don't know if there's any director who's done it in either quite like he did. Yeah, Throne of Blood was, for lack of a better term, just like insanity. By far my favorite adaptation of any Shakespeare, in any medium. And the ending is just absurd. Like, for the most part, the rest of the movie is pretty quiet. And then in the last 5 minutes is one of like the craziest performances, first of all from Mifune, and just the practical effects and like the pacing of everything and the pacing of the edit, it all like ramps up. And it seems, I mean, it's obviously intentional, this juxtaposition from this calm, sort of haunting, foreboding sort of tone in the first 2/3. But yeah, the ending is just explosive, and then in like the last 10 seconds it quiets down again, and then it's over. And it's really one of those films where the ending like cemented this film as one of my all-time favorites. Some days it's my favorite Kurosawa film.
Yeah, you just mentioned it's probably your favorite Shakespeare adaptation, so you like it more than Ran?
Yeah.
Because I've seen Ran, and it's incredible. So I've seen Ran, Ikiru, and that's it for now. There are so many filmmakers I have to get into, like massive filmmakers.
He is a fundamental pillar in the history of cinema.
Wait, I have to restart my recording on the cam. Yeah, running again.
Oh, camera fell asleep?
Somehow it has this function that it can only record 20 minutes at once.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, no problem. All right, so let's go with your first.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. One of my main favorites, of course, Persona, and that ending is the reason why I like it so much, is also the reason why I like the film as a whole as much as I do. Because for me, Persona is like taking film apart and putting it together in a new way again. Like, it's such an incredibly like influential film. The first time I watched it, I was stunned at how perfectly it fits into my taste and my interests. I love films that include a commentary on film itself and that explore the medium itself. So obviously I love Persona, a film that starts off with a kind of montage that seems to take film as a medium apart, and then it ends with a scene that really, it wraps up all the themes and elements that I love so much about the film and puts them into one last frame. And that's incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember I've seen Persona maybe 3 times. The first of which was actually for the film school that I went to for like
Yeah.
a film history class. And I remember it being like one of the most scary films that I had seen at the point. Along with like Eraserhead too. I don't know what it was about those two films,
Yeah.
but
Eraserhead, yeah, is it was so scary the first time I watched it. But that's the thing with David Lynch films in general, I
mhm.
think.
Yeah, Mulholland Drive too. There's like a
Yeah.
couple parts that are honestly more terrifying than any horror film.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, in Persona, it's the shot where their faces are overlapped, and then
Yeah.
actually with that shot, I had heard a story from set where like Liv Ullmann had seen a cut of it, and she thought that frame was like just a bad photo of herself or something.
I heard that.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's,
Yeah.
it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll get into my second pick now.
Yeah. Go
Uh,
ahead.
and I know you haven't seen this one, but
Hmm.
it's Kieslowski's Three Colors Red. Um, and this used to be my favorite of the trilogy. I think now it's returned to blue again. But Three Colors Red is the last film of the trilogy, and I believe it was the last film Kieslowski made ever, right? I think it was his last film. He might have made one after it.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
not
not sure,
positive.
but
But either way, I think it's sort of regarded as like his final masterpiece. And not only does it sort of resolve his career in such a like perfect way, but yeah, it resolves the trilogy. And without spoiling anything, it thematically ties together the white, blue, and red. And I've never seen an ending quite like it that ties together other films without, I don't know, it's like a spiritual link almost, where this bond between films isn't really realized until the final moments of it. And in a weird way, Three Colors Red is also kind of scary to me, because the last shot, it's not a scary frame, but like it just sends chills down my spine every time I see it. Because man, it's probably the best use of freeze frame of all time. And like when you see it and when the frame freezes, you know it's the ending, and you know it's brilliant, and you're just sitting there like, holy shit, like he just did that.
uh,
Um, but yeah,
every
that's
time every time I talk to you, you make me want to watch so many more films I don't know yet. It's
and I hope that's what this episode does. I hope you guys
yeah.
try to check out all of these films. Okay, so your second pick.
Um, let's see. I'll go with Ida by Pawlikowski. Um, I've seen Cold War as well. I saw Ida first, and then a few weeks later I watched Cold War. And somehow, although I know that many people appreciate Cold War more or like it more, Ida is the film that like couldn't like get out of my head after seeing it. It's probably been one of the film overall probably was one of the most emotional experiences I've ever had with film, and a big part of that was the ending, because I don't think I've ever seen a handheld shot that so profoundly affected me, and it's only because of the everything that came before that ending, that last shot is so effective. It's unlike anything I've ever experienced because it's so simple. and in any other film it wouldn't have any impact at all because of it being so simple. But in that film, Pawlikowski, like the direction is so on point and so perfect. There's certain directors that just know when to keep it completely minimal, and of course Ida is an incredibly like minimalistic film in terms of color and it being 4:3 format, and the cinematography having like tons and tons of negative space. There's more like empty walls and stuff like that than actual faces, and but that ending when it rolls around and there's music playing for what seems like the first time in the entire film, it's emotional in ways that I couldn't like comprehend when I first saw it. Yeah.
It's liberating. Yeah.
Yeah.
I often wonder if that shot was like a nod almost to Satin Tango. Have you seen the Bella Tarko?
I haven't seen it yet, but
Okay, no worries, no worries. I'm
yeah.
excited for you, and I'm envious as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, my experience with Ida was sort of the reverse because I had seen Cold War first, in 2018 at 2018 at the Telluride Film Festival. Remember not knowing what it was even about going into it. Just got the ticket because my friends wanted to see it. I thought it was a documentary about literally the Cold War. Silly me. And then I went into it and it's this beautifully shot black and white narrative. It's something strange about Pawlikowski because his films on the exterior feel so cold and
Yeah.
objective, but somehow he's able to integrate, whether it is this like very intentional juxtaposition of handheld versus static,
Yeah.
or I don't know, some magical close up or something like that, but somehow he's able to make such emotional and resonating films that are so like
Yeah.
are so objective and cold on the outside.
When looking into her eyes in that last shot, there's almost nothing there because there's no white spot of reflection in her eyes. It's just it's incredible what, yeah, like you said, how something so almost objective, yeah, has the ability to be so emotional. And I think it may be due to the fact that if a film leaves the audience that much freedom in terms of understanding and giving themselves to the film emotionally, they'll automatically, at least that was the case with me, put their own feelings and experiences and thoughts into the film, because it might seem like the film doesn't just give it to them and doesn't do the thinking for them. So it is a film that really lets you think on your own while experiencing that journey, and that last shot just wraps it up perfectly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I've sort of thought to myself that the reason that he includes so much headspace in that upper third of his frames is, I mean, in Ida it makes sense from like a religious perspective to leave that room for the higher power, I
Yeah.
think. But
Yeah.
to occupy the space. But I also think by leaving that much room and like leaving characters often on like the center or the lower third of the frame is to sort of just visually communicate how their thoughts are like a
Yeah.
big part of the scenes themselves. And with so much negative space, like the audience is sort of forced to either look around it or like focus on the fact that there is like nothing there. And
Yeah.
it's brilliant. Did Lucas Zoll shoot both of those, Ida and Cold
Yeah.
War? Okay.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a master. He has a really incredible quote actually that I think about a lot. I think he says American audiences like to go to the movies to forget and to distract themselves from reality, but
Yeah.
I prefer films that make me remember. And
Yeah.
I couldn't resonate with that more. Like
Same. Yeah.
I mean,
Absolutely.
escapism is good for films, but I think when I'm watching a film, I'm not looking to necessarily get away.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
more looking to, yeah, go inwards and like actually go deeper and like explore more.
Yeah.
So
I guess it's a pretty European perspective, that Kurosawa of course has, because European cinema and American cinema have completely, like, you have pretty different origins,
yeah, yeah.
and so there are different places kind of in time, or in within the evolution of cinema.
Hmm.
But I couldn't, like, that resonates so much with me.
It's making me rethink. Yeah, your points are making me rethink where Ida should place on my list because it is in there.
Yeah.
Cold War is currently above it, but I am now rethinking that. And
Yeah, Cold War. The thing with Ida and Cold War, I know both of them are incredible, but for me, Ida, like, no questions asked. For me, it's the better film. I know it's not, like, there's not an objective opinion on that, but it's everything from the cinematography, the minimalist acting, the static shots, everything feels more intentional and more valuable to the themes and the story the film is telling. While in Cold War, that's the case as well. Like, of course, it's an incredible film, but it almost contrasts the incredible, like, the tumultuous nature of that time in those people's lives, and that it feels like Cold War should have been longer, or
yeah, I've also felt that,
yeah,
especially on the second viewing that I had with it. Um, Interesting, man. I mean, I could talk about Pavlikovsky all day, but
yeah, same.
uh, man, if Ida ends up moving above Cold War on my series, then just know it's probably because of this talk. Um, yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, I love both of them, but uh,
yeah, both are amazing.
yeah, I'll get into my third pick now. Um,
Yeah.
I was going to go with Requiem for a Dream, which I just featured on my top 200 series, but I'm going to go with a different film from Darren Aronofsky, which is Black Swan. Uh, Aronofsky is an interesting director because he's such a provocateur. Like, all of his films are so in your face, and in terms of like getting a reaction out of his audience, like he's a very self-aware filmmaker in that regard. Um, and regardless of what you think about his films, if he's good at anything, it's his skill in ending a film. Um, I mean, you could say the same with like The Wrestler as well. I haven't seen The Fountain yet, but Black Swan and Requiem both have some of the most memorable last few moments of a film I've ever seen. And Black Swan especially because my interpretation of that scene has actually changed during the last viewing that I had of it. And it's something like I know a lot of people would probably put Whiplash in their top 5 endings. But and this is a hot take. I absolutely love Whiplash, but Black Swan is the exact same ending just done 4 years before, and I think there's more meaning to Black Swan's version of it, um, where they're both this sort of like final explosive exploration of perfection and like the journey for seeking perfection. But what's so interesting about Black Swans, and both of them also have like it cuts from like that medium wide of the performance, like the powerful performance, and then it cuts in really tight to extreme close-ups of two reactions with Fletcher and Miles Teller's character, and then with Nina and her mother in the audience. But the thing that's interesting about Black Swans is during that cut, instead of just communicating like, oh, like this is it, like you've done it, look how cool this is, it's communicating this evolution of Nina and like the most philosophical regard. And I hope this doesn't sound too pretentious, but when the camera's cutting back and forth, they're like really quick cuts between Nina and her mom in the audience. And just before she jumps, you've started to notice like she's bleeding from her stomach, right? Which the audience is sort of thinking like, oh, this is like a plot thing because of what she and Mila Kunis did earlier in the film. But what's interesting, and I admit, like, I did read a bit about this, and I think it comes directly from Aronofsky himself, but when she lands and like Vincent Cassel and all of her other dancers are surrounding her and applauding her, and you can hear the audience cheering in the background. And, the first couple times I watched this film, I thought, okay, like she's dying. Like she's going to die at the end of this. Especially with like the fade to white and all that. What I ended up reading is that the bleeding from the stomach is more symbolic, and that the bleeding in the stomach is symbolic for where the umbilical cord would be. And when she's jumping from the ledge, she's literally, because the mother character throughout the whole film has been so controlling and manipulative of Nina. And this moment is symbolically like Nina's release from her. When she jumps off, and then, yeah, you have the bleeding where the umbilical cord was, which is like physically the connection between mother and child. She's metaphorically severed from her mother at this point and becomes her own woman. And it's a literal swan song of her innocence. Like, it's one of the like most subtle but like brilliant endings in terms of like an adult coming of age story, I think.
Damn it.
Yeah,
Now I'll have to rewatch Black Swan.
Yeah, it's I mean, I haven't seen it in a couple months, but yeah, it's also very high on my list, and it's largely because of the ending.
Yeah. And it's a dance film, of course. Or
that too.
Not a dance film, but a film about dance. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which I'll let you get to your third pick, but my fourth pick will also involve dance.
Oh. Yeah, I guess this one, or the next three actually, I have are very similar in terms of. I mean, you can see where my taste is kind of. Things I really appreciate or love films that have an ambiguous ending. In terms of characters seeking a certain truth and not being able to find it, or being devastated by what they find. The film I'll talk about now, The Vanishing, the 1988 film, Spoorloos in the original version. It's a film my cousin recommended me, and it's a really slow thriller. Person goes missing, the partner goes out to find where she went and what happened to her, and that journey leads him down a really like obsessive kind of path. And that theme of obsession and having to know what happened, or something not letting a character go, is something that I kind of feel a deep connection towards. I'm not quite sure why yet, but I seem to have an obsession with obsession, in film. So it's the perfect film for me, because that ending, there's certain endings that give you completely different viewpoint on everything you've seen in a world, like plot twist kind of films. And then there's films like Spoorloos that just the ending is exactly what we expected it to be, and it's so banal almost, but terrifying because it's so banal. It's just exactly what we always knew was going to happen, kind of, and that makes it all the more terrifying and doesn't take away from it being devastating. Subverts the inherently human instinct to think that something grand has to happen, like in film in general, but in life, I guess, as well. And then it's just exactly what we, like, deep within ourselves knew would happen, but weren't ready to accept, because we weren't ready to acknowledge that some things are just that simple and terrifying because they are. Yeah.
Hmm. I'm super excited to check this one out as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, for everybody listening, make sure that you find the 1988 version, because
Yeah.
when I was just Googling it, I found 2 other films titled the same.
There's actually a remake by the same director. He remade his own film. I guess there's a few directors that did that. Haneke did it with
yeah.
Funny Games, yeah. But definitely watch the 1988 version. It's incredible. It's a pretty small film, but that makes it even better in my opinion. And thematically, yeah, since you're going to watch it, it'll tie in very nicely with No Country for Old Men and, yeah, films that go into that kind of direction, so you may like it.
Okay, so going into my 4th pick, we have a film by Bong Joon-ho, and that film is Mother, which is actually currently my favorite film from him. I saw it after I saw Parasite, and yeah, I had already seen Memories of Murder at this point as well. And you have not seen Mother?
I haven't, no.
Okay. I'll be careful. I'll be careful with what I say.
I'll watch it as soon as possible. Like, there's so many films I have to watch because of you. It's terrible. The more films you watch, the less you actually know, and the more you know that you haven't watched yet. It's so it's amazing, but yeah.
Yeah.
There's just so many.
So Mother is a really interesting film, and every time that I mention it to someone, people just always automatically think I'm talking about Aronofsky's Mother, because it got more, I guess, attention. But yeah, this Mother, I think, is from 2008. And there's no exclamation point at the end of it. So that's how you can distinguish, I guess. Without spoiling the plot of what makes this so brilliant of an ending is the fact that it's bookended with dance, which is something that I could, like, never ignore. And just, like, the absurdity of it in a way, both the opening and the ending are played out in, I think, one take. There are certain moments in cinema and, like, certain shots in films where the longer they hold, the better they get, simply for the fact that the director consciously chose not to cut. And we have a pick.
We'll get
at
to
the
that.
end. Yeah, we'll get to that. But in this scenario, like, it's not, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, it's a very handheld, shaky shot at the end, whereas the beginning one is very fluid and flowing. And so I think definitely that speaks to the character's arc and what has changed with her from the moment we see her at the beginning to the end. And actually, I would also include Mother as one of the best film openings of all time as well. It's just insane. The themes that this ending tackles, such as, like, the grandest version of ignorance is bliss that you could ever imagine. The final shot is silhouettes, and there's I don't know if there's ever more of a brilliant use of, like, a musical cue in an ending, where right before the music comes in, it's just silence. Like, there's literally nothing in the sound mix. And plot-wise, what happens right before is, like, one of the most mind-blowing things to begin with. But then you add in this element of just bringing in the same musical cues that came in at the beginning, and again, like, this sort of element of absurdity, like this middle-aged Asian woman just dancing. It's, like, beautiful, but it's also really, like, tragic and melancholic. And the melody is this acoustic guitar, and there's just nothing like it, really.
And I guess mixing something absurd and with some kind of melancholy within the same film or even same shot is pretty typical for Bong Joon-ho.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I don't know if absurd is the right word from what I'm meaning. I can't quite put my finger on it, but yeah, there's just something. The way that he almost uses comedy to play into drama is maybe what I'm meaning, because the dance that she's doing is like, it's very carefree, and like she's obviously like really feeling it, and there's just, I think, similar to Ida actually, in cutting from this flowing, moving aesthetic to handheld at the very end. Wow, I didn't even like plan that parallel, but yeah, it's really interesting actually. The ending is all about freedom, and for different reasons as Ida, but it's truly like, I remember watching this in my New York apartment with my roommates, and it ended and we all just sort of like looked at each other. And we're like, did it really, what just happened? But it's grown to be one of what I think is the greatest endings.
I'll go ahead and talk about Memories of Murder because it fits very well now with Bong Joon-ho. Yeah, Memories of Murder ties in with everything I've mentioned before as well, because the setup of a detective looking for a serial killer, not being able to find them, and that experience absolutely changing them as a person and shattering their beliefs or questioning their beliefs and morals and the way they see the world. Again, obsession, of course, plays a huge part in that, like a person getting obsessed with a case. That's why I love Zodiac as much as I do. It's my favorite Fincher film. And Memories of Murder perfectly, joins that selection of films. And that ending, that last shot is... it's... I don't even know how... I wouldn't know how to describe that shot to anyone. Of course I could describe what's in the frame, but just what it makes you feel and how it ties the entire film together in one final scene and then in one final shot is incredible. And again, of course, the performance plays a big part in it.
Song Kang-ho is a legend.
Yeah, he is. And then the musical cue, the colors, matching the colors from the beginning, but contrasting those that were present during the time of the case and the detectives looking for the serial killer. And then the colors are back to where they were at in the beginning, first scene of the film, but the circumstances and the way we view that place and that world our characters are in completely changed. So that final shot combined with what interviews with Bong Joon-ho kind of revealed of the meaning of that final look into the camera, towards the audience, the despair and the unresolved nature of that last shot is so emotional to me. There's been several times where I had to cry during that shot, and it's kind of sadness that no other film gives me, because it's such a specific feeling for me. It's not melancholy or something you could label in any other film, but there's no other shot in film that makes me have that emotion. So I guess that's why I love it so much.
I would go as far as to say it's probably the best use of breaking the fourth wall in all of film.
For me it definitely is.
And I'm glad that you picked this, because it's a film that like has radically changed on my subsequent viewings, and I've only liked it more and more the more times I've seen it. The ending is especially interesting to me because it's something that like in the hands of any other director or actor would have been so cheesy. Like ending a film with your character turning to look dead at the camera. Literally, like if any other person had tried to do it, it would have been like, oh my gosh, what the heck is this? But I don't know if you want to tell the story of the interview or what, but
Yeah, I can go ahead and. So I guess small spoiler warning, but the case is still unresolved. The serial killer isn't found, and that final scene is a flash forward. So we cut a few years forwards in time. The detective that once was kind of a ruthless kind of guy, pretty manipulative, trying to get evidence out of witnesses that like in kind of unlawful ways. Um, so we cut forwards. He's a family man with his wife. He has a completely different job, and then he drives past um, uh, a land kind of road that goes down a field. Tells his driver to stop because that's the place where the first body from that serial killing was found. So he goes there, and then a girl walks past, and yeah, in that conversation, it's revealed that she saw a man walk, like crouching down there where he's crouching down, looking at the spot where he once saw the dead body of a woman lying. And the girl probably came home from school, tells him that she saw a man like at the exact same spot looking there.
I
And
just got so many shivers. I mean, it's
yeah,
freezing here right now,
that
but
that scene, and you can see in Sung Kang Ho's face like that, the devastation, and of course there's several interpretations of who that man might have been, but of course it could have been the killer, uh, going back to a place where he once murdered someone, and then he asks the girl what he looked like, because of course that's essentially what the audience has been asking themselves all along. And the only answer we get is plain, normal,
yeah, it's terrifying.
ordinary, and it's the same kind of terrifying that Zodiac has, but in a completely different way. You can feel that the culture behind the film is a completely different one, and that those final words then combined with the last look, which Bong Joon-ho like revealed to be a look towards the audience and towards the killer,
Yeah,
who
yeah.
was still, not found during the film's release, who might be watching the film, and imagining that scenario, a normal person sitting in the theater somewhere watching that film, and so, that fourth wall break, which isn't a fourth wall break in the traditional sense, but it speaks to the audience in way more ways than most fourth wall
Absolutely.
breaks
Yeah.
do.
And I'm glad you brought up the culture of it too, because it is so different than Zodiac, just because of like the country that this happened in, like America.
And the time.
Right. I mean, yeah, America really just glorifies serial killers. Like they're celebrities in this country, and it's like it's disgusting. But the culture of surrounding this case, especially in like South Korea, it's like a much different tone, and like you can really feel it in the ending. So I'm glad that you mentioned Memories of Murder. Okay, going into my fifth pick.
I'll take a quick drink.
Sponsored by.
Water.
Okay, so my fifth is actually Edward Yang's EE. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I don't know. But I think leading into our conversation about No Country for Old Men, this film is perfect because it is like a very quiet film the whole way through. And unlike Throne of Blood, it doesn't ramp up at the end into a mass escalation of violence and spectacle, but instead it remains quiet. And it's just Edward Yank's films manage to be so poetic without feeling like the slightest bit pretentious. His films are so unfull of themselves, which would not be the case with another director who makes a 3.5 hour long movie about just people like existing in their natural environments. There's just something about his films that, yeah, in the hands of somebody else would not warrant a 3 hour plus runtime simply because of the subject matter. But the way that he tells his stories, it's just, it makes sense. It's just the most simple, like we were talking about before, of endings. And all it really needs is like one monologue, and then it's done. It's this one of the main characters of the film. This is this little boy who's been going through the film, taking pictures of the backs of people's heads. Honestly, like one of the greatest child performances of all time. He in the ending, he's reading a eulogy that he wrote to his grandmother, and it's so simple, but it's also so profound. Like hearing these wisdoms spoken from like a child, and I mean obviously like Edward Yang wrote this as an adult, but hearing it from the mind of this kid is like so profound and so moving, and like it actually touches on similar themes of No Country for Old Men in terms of like age and experience and like family ties and what it means to be young and what it means to be old. It's man, yeah, you've got to check it out. It's definitely a film you need to like be in the right patient sort of mindset, but
There's so many films that are so high in my anticipation kind of list, and EE is definitely one of them. Yeah.
The ending of EE also utilizes like one of the most perfect musical cues that I can think of. Just a piano. There's nothing else, nothing crazy. It's perfect. Like there's literally no other word to describe it other than just perfection. So that's my fifth pick, excluding our two shared picks. But yeah, let's go into your fifth pick.
Yeah, my fifth pick is Antonioni's Blow Up. And I've only recently started truly getting into Antonioni. But Blow Up, actually, yeah, another funny thing. I started watching Blow Up a year ago or 1.5 years ago. I started watching it, and it was way too boring. I stopped after like the first 10 minutes, and now after like having seen a lot of other films and having gotten way deeper and way more into film, I watched it, and it's a very slow film, but incredibly intentionally slow, because a main theme is boredom, so naturally it'll be a film that expresses that. But that ending, yeah, I love it because it's so ambiguous. What's there, what isn't there, what is real, what is not real. Because it's a scene of, yeah, no, I don't want to spoil anything.
I actually haven't seen it. I thought you were picking Zodiac for your fifth.
No.
But
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't seen this one yet.
Yeah, I'll refrain from spoiling anything.
Thank you.
But it's an incredibly quiet ending, just as quiet as the entire film. Yeah, what's incredible about that film, speaking about culture with Memories of Murder, you can feel that it's a not English-born director making a film about England at that time, Britain at the time, but that it's a kind of more distanced, reflective view on the entire thing. You'll probably know what I'm talking about once you've seen it.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I can't wait to see it.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so when we were talking about what topic to do yesterday, actually, and
yeah,
we just sort of naturally, the conversation gravitated towards Portrait of a Lady on Fire and No Country for Old Men, and we just figured, like, since we both want to talk about these two, we'll just have these as shared picks and then pick additional 5 each. So let's start with No Country, since the conversation was already sort of going there anyway.
You want to go ahead?
No. All you this time.
No. I just talked, so now it's your
true.
turn.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I mean, this is Like the ending of No Country is the reason that I would pick this over There Will Be Blood every
Yes,
time.
yes,
There's a huge debate, mainly because they were both 2007 westerns that competed for Best Picture. There's
shot
a
close to
huge
each
debate.
other.
Yeah, yeah, shot very close to each other. There's a huge debate in the film community. There Will Be Blood versus No Country, and I think the popular answer now is There Will Be Blood. But yeah, I think I did a poll recently, and it still skewed that way a little bit. But and There Will Be Blood has a fantastic ending as well. I don't know if you've read the novel by Cormac McCarthy. I actually have it like right there. He's one of my favorite authors, and I know that the script for No Country is pretty much verbatim for the novel. The Coens didn't really change much, and
Yeah,
I think
I heard that. Yeah,
if they did change anything, it's the sheer like weight and impact that this ending really has. Like when I read the novel, I felt it for sure, but seeing the film, it's another thing entirely, because like when you're reading the book, you have to sort of interject your own sort of vision of what Sheriff Ed Tom Bell might look like. But I mean, there's no other than Tommy Lee Jones. Like
yeah,
he's the guy, and this and Portrait are sort of like parallel picks because of the way that they utilize shot reverse shot.
true. I haven't thought about that yet,
Yeah,
but
and they
so
use
true. Yeah,
yeah, they use it differently, but
but both scenes start on a typical shot reverse shot, and then they switch to a final reverse shot, but it holds that shot and doesn't. Yeah, it lingers there and then the film ends. Yeah.
yeah, and No Country's actually I
And then
remember
I
it
woke up.
being yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh my god, dude. No Country's does cut back to his wife for like one
Yeah,
second, and then it cuts back to
true.
him.
Yeah.
And my god, like you can hear the clock ticking in the background, which is not a detail that I picked up my first watch of it. The conversation's about time, it's about dreams, it's about our future, it's about our past as a country, it's about this guy's place in the world as the
Yeah.
world is evolving at a pace he can't keep up with. And
About
like
morals and
it,
absence of morals and
yeah, the any film that ends with like a dream is a bit of a cliche at this point, or starts with a dream for that matter. But if you're talking about a dream, I don't care. It's completely different. All this ending is like as exciting and thrilling as the I don't know 90 minutes before it, or probably more than that, but
yeah.
as thrilling as the rest of the film is, to end on such a like quiet note. There's no music, and there's like pretty much no music throughout the entire film anyway. But
Yeah.
this scene is scored by the ticking of the clock, and it's a very like subtle in the sound
Yeah.
mix, but it's definitely a present element, and you can hear it, and it's one of the last things it is the last thing you hear, and it just is sort of this reminder that like time doesn't stop for anybody, and it's just perfect. Like
Yeah.
the sheer mastery of the craft you have to end a film on just a simple conversation is at the utmost. Like
Yeah, it's the simple things that turn out to be the hardest, I think.
yeah, truly.
Um, to to actually do well because it's done so many times, and to inject something like special into that is, I guess, the hardest thing. But that ending, dude, it's like it's an ending that you'll find something new in every time. It's such a precise scene. Of course, the wife is kind of, or for me, it feels like I'm the wife
Yeah,
listening to him
I was gonna say that
talk
too.
about talk about his dreams, and I guess talking about dreams can be pretty boring, basically. Like if I hear other people talk about their dreams, they often seem boring because you can't quite explain dreams, and
Exactly.
they can't be felt by by other people other than you. So you can feel that in that scene.
She doesn't quite get it.
She doesn't quite get it. That same thing could happen to the audience the first time watching that. It's a film that you'll have to watch several times. So like to have that in there that the audience might misunderstand it, to have that in there like actually as a character,
it's brilliant.
not getting it. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's the best way to like defend yourself from criticism, basically.
And I mean, they do it without even explicitly saying that. Like,
right. And there's two dreams he's talking about, right?
Yeah.
And one of the major takeaways from those that I have is that he's still hoping for a bright, warm future with that torch visual kind of motif that lies ahead. But then he says, and then I woke up.
Shivers.
And you realize, of course, it's a dream, and it's a hope he has, but one that will simply fade into black or cut to black as harshly as the film does then. And so that hope basically disappears. And to end on something that heavy but that profound is it's my taste.
And I'm so glad we share that, because I know people who hate the ending of No Country for Old Men. And there's nothing more infuriating to me. Like, I just...
And you told me you're the kind of person that'll tell those people that they're wrong. They're wrong to not like that.
I definitely used to be.
I'm
a bit kinder, I think I would like to say now.
Yeah, same.
But
same.
No, it is like, I think more so than me being mad at somebody not liking or appreciating this, at least, it's like almost like not disappointed even. Like I almost feel bad that like as and not like in a condescending way at all, but as
you're just more intelligent, right?
No, in like in contemporary cinema and like Whiplash and Black Swan and like examples that I've mentioned as being all-time great endings, but like in contemporary cinema, mainstream audiences have been conditioned to desire and like expect this, like they expect the ending to be like the biggest part. And at the beginning of the podcast I mentioned how the ending is the most important, but that important does not equate to grand at all.
Or plot twist or something.
Right.
Like that.
Yeah, there's no plot twist in No Country for Old Men. Some people might expect it to end... Yeah, spoiler for non-spoiler, but some people might expect it to end the scene before, or even the scene before that. Like, it's just so perfect in its placement, and like, there's nothing... As a filmmaker, there's nothing more satisfying than seeing another filmmaker who knows when to end. Like... There are filmmakers who know how to end a scene or how to end a film, but it could have been ended like before, or like maybe like it could have ended later. When is like the crucial moment, and there is literally not a frame that you can take out of No Country for Old Men. Literally not a frame.
That's why I love it so much. It's such a precise film, and I love films that feel precise and distanced, but not too distanced that you can't get into the film as like into that world. I love films that build a world perfectly and then show it in a more objective manner. And No Country for Old Men is like the perfect example.
And that's another takeaway I think of the ticking clock at the end, is like, this probably isn't their intention, but to me it feels like a tempo, and like this film is just methodical and like it's objective and it's flawless, literally, like to the beat. Every single frame, every single cut is like, I can't say more good things about it. So let's just move on to our final shared pick.
Bro, my battery for the camera just
it died.
Yeah, it died.
Do you have another one? While Claudius is getting his other battery, I think that it's very funny that his camera cut right when we were talking about the cut to black from No Country for Old Men. Maybe we should have just ended the episode there, but I don't know. We'll see. Man, I really hope yeah, for those watching the video version of this, Claudia's camera just cut. And I
Yeah.
think it might have cut right when we were talking about it, which would be incredible.
And then cut to black.
And then cut to black. I know, I'm thinking like we should have just ended the episode there.
Yeah.
Just like but yeah, so I'll just be on screen by myself now. Okay, so let's go quickly into our last pick, last shared pick, which is Portrait of a Lady on Fire. I think the most recent film in our
Yeah.
selections.
I think it is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely in mine. Yeah. and
Actually,
yours too.
before we talk about it, let's just quickly say our honorable mentions for the podcast. So, mine
Yeah.
are Villeneuve's Enemy, Raw, which I just posted about, Tarkovsky's The Sacrifice,
Yeah.
which is insane that I didn't include it, but Blue Valentine, Grave of the Fireflies, and The Witch.
Yeah. There's way too many to actually mention now for me, and those are just films that popped into my mind while thinking about which ones I should pick. But Zodiac, Vertigo, Sicario, White Ribbon, of course.
Of course.
Eyes Wide Shut, which I think is one of the most underrated Kubrick film.
I would agree with that.
It gets better and better every time you watch it, in my opinion. Phantom Thread. Again, there's a kind of pattern. Eyes Wide Shut, Phantom Thread, and Vertigo.
Yeah.
Triple feature. And Crash, 1996 version by Cronenberg, of course.
Of
and
course.
Killing of a Sacred Deer, which has one of the most incredible musical cues at the end. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's great that we had such like different picks too, aside from these final two.
Yeah.
But we do have to wrap up the podcast soon, so let's just get into one of the greatest endings of modern cinema, which is Celine Sciamma's Portrait of a Lady on Fire. I'll let you go first with this one.
Yeah, we talked about it yesterday that we somehow got into talking about Portrait, and that ending. Yeah, you mentioned that Celine Sciamma at a Q&A you were at was asked why she doesn't cut back to a reverse shot of Marianne, right? So just holds and the shot zooms in, and we just see Adele Haenel's performance, which is like one of the most incredible performances ever, like in past years. And my major takeaway from that is, although we don't see Marianne in that like scene, we feel more close to her than in any other moment in the film, or at least that's my take on it.
We become her.
We become her. Yeah, we see through her and we breathe with her. The camera moves, actually synced with Adele Haenel's performance and breathing and crying and joyful kind of crying and intense breathing, and the camera turns into that point of view, and there's like, I can't, like off the top of my head, I couldn't name a more intimate yet distanced moment, because we're like basically sitting across from her on the opposite side of the room, watching her from a distance, knowing we can't get to her, but still it's such a close and intimate moment for the characters and for the audience and the characters. Yeah,
And
it's incredible.
It truly is. And like we mentioned before, the parallel between this and No Country for Old Men, putting the audience in the perspective of the second character is absolutely brilliant. And I'm sure there's other films that have done this. Secondly, the music that plays, it's Vivaldi, is it not?
Four Seasons Summer.
Yeah, which is it's the piece of music that Marianne is trying to play for her earlier, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And once again, it's a film that doesn't have a film score, just like No Country for Old Men. It's just, we only hear music that's actually played in the film.
Right.
Or sung in Portrait's case. And because of that, and I had something like Ida on my list, also a film where there's actually no film music. So I appreciate films like that a lot. And when the music cues in, it hits like on a completely different level than it would with other films.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so going into, I guess we can sort of end on this bit that Celine was asked during the Q&A. Somebody was asking, like, why didn't you cut back to the reaction? Like, don't you think as the audience we want to see how the main character, I mean, they're both main characters, but like how the main character is feeling? And I loved her answer because she was just like, honestly, like up until this point, sure, like it's all about the narrative. But at this moment, once we cut to this final angle, this final shot, it stops becoming about the film almost. Like it stops becoming about the characters at this point. When you're put into this more subjective seat, all that matters is that it's like a very self-reflexive way to view this ending. But the director herself was saying, at this point, all that matters is you're sitting in a theater watching a person in a theater giving an amazing performance, listening to amazing music. And it's like, it's more about the film watching experience. Like she wants you to feel the fact that you're watching a film when you're seeing this ending. Not to say it's not immersive, but there are some endings that are just so beyond themselves that it's hard not to think of the fact like, wow, some genius actually made this. Like this is a piece of art. And like, she's like, it just becomes like, you shouldn't be thinking about that. You should just be thinking, oh my gosh, Adele Haenel's giving this great performance. And like, this is the end of the film. Like there's no other way that that film could have ended. I don't think that made sense anyway.
Yeah.
So, I think honestly, that's probably the best film to end this conversation on, just because it does use elements of like all the other endings that we've talked about, you know, music, anticipation, pacing, and resolving themes, resolving arcs and stuff.
And it reflects on film itself. Yeah.
It does, yeah. And it also, I would say, isn't a complete wrap on the bow. Like we don't get a resolution like we wanted. Yeah, it definitely leaves you desiring.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, dude, thank you so much for being on this episode. It was a lot longer. This might be like an hour and a half, 2-hour episode actually.
Yeah.
But
your first one was 1 hour?
First one was an hour, yeah.
Yeah, you might have to cut it somehow, right?
I'll try. But I think there are people who would listen to the whole thing. Dude, thank you so much for being on. I think
I really enjoyed it. It's amazing. And what a topic.
And I feel so ashamed that an episode about great endings will have no ending itself to the podcast, but I think maybe we should just end it
tragedy
as No Country does with...
Maybe we should just cut to black.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. And no, but actually thanks guys for listening, and I'm sure that we'll be on future episodes together. I really like this
definitely
this dynamic. All right, so thanks again everybody. Claudius, my camera just died, so
nice.
We will have a cut to black. Thanks for listening. We will see you in episode 3.